Hey, what's up, my friends? Welcome back to
where
the
strength
Intentional
is
Athlete
more than a
Podcast.
number on the bar.
Today, I'm really
your host,
excited
Ross
to sit
Lepela,
down with
powerlifter,
special
coach,
guest
and
Ashton
co-creator of the
Ruska.
Intentional Athlete Experience.
If you've been
This show
around
is for
powerlifting,
lifters,
you
movers,
probably are
and
very
seekers
familiar with who
who
Ashton
know
is.
that what
He's
happens
a
in the
very
gym
gifted,
that goes
very
into
high-level
your
lifter.
life.
Super
We
strong.
explore how to train with purpose,
And
live
I
with
had
clarity,
the pleasure of actually
and channel
competing with
the pursuit
Ashton
of strength
in
into
his
something
very
deeper,
first ever powerlifting
something
meet. It was
transformative.
2013
Each episode,
Alaska State
we'll dive into
Championships,
conversation,
and he was
tools,
15,
and insights that
deadlifted
help
like
you align
550
your
pounds, like it
mindset,
was nothing.
body, and
It was
spirit.
a spectacle.
Because
Everybody
real
was
growth
just completely blown
doesn't
away.
just
They're
happen
like,
under the
"Whoa,
barbell.
who is this
It happens
kid?"
in your mind,
Oh,
in
this
your
kid
breath,
is going to be
and in your
a
choices.
force to be reckoned with.
This is about more than just PRs.
And a
This is
couple
about
of
presence,
months ago,
power,
he was
and
getting ready
progress
for
that
the
lasts.
Sheffield. Had
Welcome
an
to the
injury.
journey,
Him
my
and I
friend.
had a
Welcome
conversation
to the
that
Intentional
was
Athlete Podcast.
really meaningful. Hey, what's up, my friends? Welcome back to the Intentional Athlete Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to sit down with special guest Ashton Ruska. If you've been around powerlifting, you probably are very familiar with who Ashton is. He is a very gifted, very high-level lifter, super strong. And I had the pleasure of actually competing with Ashton in his very first ever powerlifting meet. It was 2013 Alaska State Championships, and he was 15, deadlifted like 550 pounds like it was nothing. It was a spectacle. Everybody was just completely blown away. They were like, whoa, who is this kid? Oh, this kid is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the sport of powerlifting. And a couple of months ago, he was getting ready for the Sheffield, had an injury. Him and I had a conversation that was really meaningful. And we talked a lot about intentional training and picking loads and what is training doing to support our life. And he's got a kid on the way and a lot of really cool stuff. So I was really excited to sit down and record this episode with Ashton and share some of his life and his story and look at how training impacts his life. Because when we as spectators watch the sport of powerlifting, we see a spectacle and feat of strength when we see Ashton. And I think a lot of times we tend to lose sight of the human a little bit in situations like that. And Ashton is very much still a human, has his own trials and tribulations, and it's really exciting to sit down and have a different tone of conversation with somebody that's high level. A lot of people, as you've heard me talk about a lot before, get into the sets and reps and all this and that. And while that stuff's important and the programming's important, the people are also important. So I'm really excited to sit down and share that side of Ashton with you all. So let's get to know him. Let's see what he's like as a person and a lot of his perspectives that he brings to the table from his doctorate in psychology is also really influential. So really excited. Let's get into it. Ashton Ruska, y'all. Ashton, my friend, how you doing today?
Great. It's a beautiful Sunday out here. Good to be here.
It is a beautiful Sunday. I'm excited to sit down and chat with you. I suspect that most people that are going to tune into the show is going to know who Ashton Ruska is and know that you're a highly talented and gifted powerlifter in the world. But why don't we start out with a little bit of an intro and maybe some things that are about Ashton and who you are and where you are in the world that maybe people don't know.
Sure. Yeah, so I've been competing in powerlifting for a long time, actually, since I want to say 2013, April 2013. I did my first meet in Anchorage, Alaska. It's funny enough, that's where we met.
Yes, sir. That it is.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that was over 12 years ago. But wow, such a fun time it was. And I've been competing every year consistently, nonstop since. I've gotten to travel to a lot of places doing this, gig. It's been whole lot of fun. It's been nice to connect with people around the globe and to, um, to contribute meaningfully, in the sense that a lot of people have been, inspired and motivated by some of the things I've done. It's helped them make changes in their own lives, and that's probably been, the most rewarding part of all this. And then personal gratification would come probably second or third on that list. But outside of powerlifting, I'm also an active duty Army officer. I am a licensed psychologist. Uh, that's kind of my capacity in the military. I'm also a husband, and I'm newly a father too. I have a 5-month-old son. His name is John, and life is good. Just another person.
Yeah, man. Well, welcome to fatherhood. I know we've talked about that a bit, and I have a few things I want to get into with that to you today. But one of the first things that you said there that really struck me that I want to talk about a little bit more detail is one of the big things that motivates you in powerlifting and why you compete and what you get from it, in that you're able to show people things and inspire other people so that they can make improvements in their lives. What are some of the things that have come up for you in this journey that can elicit that? Like, can you give some examples and details?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've had people, from so many different countries just sort of reach out, have, conversations with me. They may ask a question or two, and I get a lot of messages about like questions and stuff. And I try to, as much as I can, answer some stuff and get back to people and everything like that. And then, they usually go into depth about how just kind of watching what I do, and watching how I do it, as well. How I do it, I think, is important too. It apparently, it motivates people to um, engage in, in similar behaviors in their own life, right? I mean, I've even had people, for example, like who have like cancer or who have like severe illnesses, reach out, and
Mm-hmm.
when they are struggling, sometimes they would come, they would view, what I do, and it would help them to, get up and walk that day or do other things that day. And, just really, really powerful stuff. And at that point, you sort of functionally realize that, me competing in a sport as simple as, as straightforward, I should say, as powerlifting is actually very it's been very impactful and I think a very positive direction and positive manner. And it's not really just about you. It's honestly about all the people that watch you, because someone is always watching, no matter how sort of small or big you are on the stage. And I think when a lot of people are watching you, there is a little bit of a pressure, but a little bit of a responsibility, but maybe a healthy pressure, I think, to, compete with, have your own style and be yourself, but to also, compete in the sport with grace, show others respect, uplift others, not just try to roll over others and tear them down, but I think just putting on display being, a decent, human being, for as flawed as I am, saying that, and I acknowledge that. But if there are some things that I can impart on others that are positive for them, I, try to do that through, competing in the sport of ours, and through other aspects of life as well. Again, I'm not the best at it, but people seem to have gotten some positive from it. So I think that's been very impactful for me, and special and dear to me, but it's also been impactful for others, which I think really matters.
Yeah, which is important, like you are arguably one of the most gifted powerlifters to come across in this generation. Like, you've done some things that are really incredible. You've won multiple national championships. You've been on the world stage. You've been to the Sheffield. You have beaten some people that are highly regarded. Like when you beat Bryce Lewis in the 105s, you were what, 94 kilos, 95 kilos in the 105.
Yeah, I
So
was on the lighter
like,
side.
yeah, you were on the lighter side. You should have competed as a 93, but you went up to the 105 and embraced that challenge and did some really good stuff. And I think it's really important and cool to hear that even though you've had the success and you've been gifted with these talents and genetic responses in your body to display such high levels of strength, you
Hmm.
don't use that as a I'm better than you. You embrace it humbly and find ways for you to use that to add value to the people around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Walking around with, an air of superiority, there's nothing to really gain from that. And I think there's so much more to life than just being a good powerlifter, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I have fun. I take competing seriously. Don't get me wrong. I want to win and I want to do well, but I don't take it so seriously to the extent that, I walk around sort of with this unapproachable, gravity. I don't think I've ever really viewed myself as that person in this space. I don't think others view me that way as well either. I think I have the evidence for that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I definitely have always enjoyed watching and seeing you participate in the sport and being around you. And I think anybody that can observe human behavior can see that you approach it with a humility and humble approach that is not off-putting. And I think that's important. Would you say that that's like something that you naturally learned like from your family life, or is there like, where does that kind of like come from in terms of your development? Because I think anybody can develop that skill, but it's generally, at least from my opinion, I look at it as something that we have to kind of develop and cultivate over time. Is there places of inspiration for that from you?
There are. I mean, yeah, growing up, I would say that I've had the luxury and have been fortunate to come across, some people in my life, some men in my life that I could really look up to, that were, that were outstanding in their own respects in their own right. And, a lot of them were, also very strong. A lot of these men would teach me kind of, I think, functionally to flee from arrogance and to try to, one, and one of the reasons for that actually is not just for everyone else, but like when you're talking about the self, right? I think if you want to improve and continuously get better at something, I think you can be blinded by arrogance. And I think that arrogance and haughtiness and pride can hold you back, especially if you view yourself as, perfect. If you're perfect, then there's nothing to fix, right?
Right.
And I certainly know I'm not perfect, so they've imparted that wisdom on me just for myself, and then like for other people, if I'm going to be, a leader, in the military, outside of the military, it's important to also not walk around and pretend that I am, perfect. I think that a lot of leadership is, displaying behaviors that can be modeled and that can be repeated by others and lead to positive outcomes. But at the same point in time, I think leadership also involves, showing people, to a healthy extent and degree that that you have your flaws too, and this is how you work on them. So I think a lot of different men, like while I was growing up, have kind of come across me, and they've kind of taught me these lessons in different ways. And I would say that has been particularly valuable for me. I'm also from a family of seven, big family. I'm the second oldest in the group. I'm also the only son. And I think also kind of growing up in the environment that I did, I think it was, it's a very humble beginning and sort of a very humble background. So I mean, I think that kind of always kept me relatively level-headed and centered as I was a kid coming up to. I was never the super, puff their chest out and blah blah blah. Maybe for a little bit when I was a young teen, but that's it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's fantastic to hear. If we look at it, like I always frame things around this intentional training process, right? And if our goal in the sport of powerlifting is to be able to put as much weight on the bar as possible and to find our capacity, you can't find your capacity in anything, in any adventure, if you lack humility, if you are arrogant and think you are good, you are better, you are the best. There is going to be a limitation to come from that. And it can show up in that way in our pursuit of powerlifting. It can show up that way as well in our other pursuits of life. And it's awesome to connect those dots, I think, when we are on these pursuits. I can only imagine that in the pursuits of your doctorate in psychology, that a lot of that information kind of reinforces those characteristics of yourself.
Absolutely. I think studying and becoming ultimately a psychologist, I mean, I think you've put it very succinctly but perfectly. Yes, I think it has reinforced a lot of the lessons that I've learned throughout life. I think it's also taught me, in addition to that, I think it's also taught me about how I can be, a healthy model for others, and how I can also, be personable and interact with others in a way that, even if they're a complete stranger, I think very often it's better to give someone the time of the day and show them dignity and respect than not. And I mean, sometimes, some people, and it's not an insult, but they may not get that anywhere else or from anyone else. And if you show
Yeah.
them, that gesture of, kindness, of respect, of dignity, they don't forget that, and it can influence some people very profoundly.
For sure.
So like, going in, you may not know that you're doing that. So I think it's
Yeah.
really important, to communicate with people in a very in a reasonable way. Um, you don't have to walk around and be something you're not. You don't have to be, the nicest, person on the planet. I know I'm not always that way. I joined the army for a reason, but it doesn't mean that you can't have, dignity, baseline dignity, respect, and courtesy for others. Um, and I think, one of the things in our field is the importance of that is often understated. I mean, even in, therapy, right, which is one thing that I do of many many things in my role, right. It's, all the work isn't always clinical, to be frank, but I will say, like, if you are doing therapy, one of the most important factors in successful therapy versus therapy that may not be as successful is, just common factors. I mean, is the therapist and is um, the client or the patient or whoever, um, can they find, like, not only some common ground, but are they building a good relationship? Are they building good rapport? Can they talk to each other and not, want to tear each other's hair out of their head, right? Um, or tear each other's, eyes out. Like, can they talk to each other with just respect, dignity, treat each other well, build a healthy, strong relationship through effective communication. And that by itself, more than almost any other factor, I mean, modality of treatment, anything else, that's one of the biggest factors in, people improving through therapy and, like, positive therapy outcomes. So, you know, all that to say, that long-winded answer, just to say that yes, my education, my training has reinforced that, a lot of these things that I've talked about, and it comes back to humility, because sometimes when you're building, relationships with people, or you're talking to people and you want to be an effective communicator, sometimes you have to leave, ego at the door. There's plenty of people that are not receptive to that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. One of the things that comes up for me in this light right now is just thinking about how common we hear in a, like, mental health world that, like, lifting weights, exercise, it becomes a sort of therapy, a sort of release, a sort of self-care that can really help somebody improve their mental well-being and get out of some pretty dark places. I know it was for me. Anybody that knows my story knows that lifting quite literally saved my life. And I often think about, what does that mean for me now? And the place I come to with stuff like that is, I need to remember and always be aware, like at a meet, at a gym, anywhere we're training around other people, to choose kindness, because it's that kind act, that act of kindness, that can really help direct that other person who may be in a state of darkness towards some light, towards some happiness, towards some joy. Whereas if I choose to be an arrogant fucking asshole, I might push them further into that darkness. Like, that is real. That can happen.
Absolutely.
Just thinking about that with, like, your lifting and your education, like how that, like, plays out for you and what you think about in those regards.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, to address the first thing you said, it's absolutely true. There is a preponderance of evidence, of studies, of, amalgamations of studies, of meta-analyses that demonstrate that aerobic, anaerobic, just physical activity, but on its own, that it's not necessarily exercise, those are distinct concepts,
Right.
actually does, yes, lead to, generally speaking, positive outcomes when it comes to behavioral health. It can be helpful, augmenting, treatments and ameliorating a number of different psychopathologies. I've actually read into and done. I've actually read into a lot of the literature and the research on this topic. My dissertation was loosely associated with a lot of it, when I worked on that, and I mean, you know, it's there, and the effects can be profound, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not to say that, exercise, lifting, and stuff like that is like the single shot cure.
For sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
For difficulties and stuff like that. But it is I think it is a huge help for many people, including myself. I mean, I have a very busy lifestyle. Day to day, do a lot, deal with a lot, carry a lot sometimes. And, being able to, get in the gym for an hour, a couple hours, and to just kind of shut that noise out, to kind of singularly focus on a goal, work very hard towards it, achieve that, leave with, a sense of accomplishment and, that I've done something, and that I've done something to become better and improve myself. I mean, there's very seldom sweeter feelings than that. Um, so I mean, it's huge, and yeah, to address even the kind of the second point, like kind of like what I alluded to earlier, right? I do think um, that yeah, like sometimes you don't know what people at the end of the day that you talk to are going through, what's going on inside of their head, what's going on inside of their world. A lot of people very often have very real things happening in their life, and you may not have any clue or inclination to it, just initially
Yeah.
meeting them and talking to them. So the default being, dignity, respect, kindness, I think can go such a long way for people, and sometimes, quite frankly, it can save lives, and it has. So
100%.
I think it is. I think it is crucial and paramount that we, as much as we can, even when we have our own bad days, we try to exude that.
How has this education in becoming a psychologist supported your lifting? I would, at least I would only imagine that it's supported it and helped it, and you've been able to do better with lifting as a result of the education.
I think so. I think it's had a profound. I think one of the understated things in powerlifting, in like strength sport in general, is, and I mean, I know some people talk about it, and I know like it's a thing and it exists. But for a lot of people, for I think the majority of people that get into the sport and do it, even just recreationally, it kind of seems like the psychological piece is sort of this nebulous concept that they may hear about here and there from a person or a podcast. But I do think that even just day to day, like I think your psychology, your psyche can have a profound impact on the trajectory of your training, on the decisions that you make in training day to day, and those decisions add up over time and can lead to a really good or a really bad prep, or to an injury, or to and we've talked quite a bit about this in the past actually. I think you know one thing that my training has provided and offered me is I'm very good at seeing if I'm being overly emotional about a topic, if if I'm catastrophizing in a moment, if I am falling into sort of one of these like cognitive traps or biases that could influence or affect like my behavior. And that's not to say that we won't be human and that we won't experience those things, but I do, especially with training, especially when it comes to my health and my body. I like to try to keep, relatively speaking, an even keel when it comes to looking at the training, like kind of on a macro scale, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have a bad day, we all have bad days.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, no problem.
You have bad days? You had, like, in training, you have bad days.
Oh, sure. I've had plenty of them.
Awesome. Cool. I just wanted to highlight that because I know there's a lot of people that see what you do and the weight you move, and just want to make sure that everybody listening knows that those bad days in terms of how we train happen to everybody.
Everyone. No, nobody.
Continue.
Nobody is immune to it. Yeah, yeah. No. I think that's a very good point. Um, no, nobody is immune to it, and we have to have the ability to zoom out, right, and to look at this data point, in an overall course and trajectory of things, right. I think that a lot of reckless or highly emotionally provocative decisions can be avoided if we just take a moment and just zoom out, right?
Yeah.
And that's generally what I try to do. Like if I have a very bad session, like I'll be communicating with my coach. I may be frustrated or upset, but later in the day, I usually zoom out. I think about it. He usually also thinks about because he's the coach. He also thinks about it. We eventually come back together and we have a discussion. Like if we just need to keep doing what we're doing and not change anything, then give it time. Give it time and be patient, and that has paid off tremendously for us. And in those rare circumstances where something maybe does need to change because it's leading to deteriorate deteriorating health or tweaking or something like that, then we can adjust those things. We're flexible enough to do that, you know. So as long as we, ultimately find a reasonable path and trajectory to the end goal.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think where the psychology piece comes in, being able to manage that, to contend with that, and to wrestle with that, right? Especially when you have, big injuries, potentially career-ending injuries, and or what can be career-ending injuries.
Yeah.
And sometimes a career-ending injury doesn't have to be one unless you allow it to be. And that's, again, where the psychology comes in, right? So as I the end of 2024, I had a pec tear, a pretty significant pec tear on the right side of my chest. It was grade 2, inching up to grade 3, but fortunately nothing was like torn from the chest wall or anything. And but still, it's been a very significant injury, and I've had to work around and train around that for the past 9 months now, 9, 10 months.
Yeah.
And we've made a lot of progress. And I mean, at one point we were even considering, should we just, go ahead, try to like get something, surgically done, and then just wait it out, bite the bullet, and get back into full swing of things, or should we just allow things to kind of play out and see what happens? And as long as we can get healthy, recoverable training and volume, and we just keep stacking very slowly, right? Ultimately,
Yeah.
Based off of the information we had, like we went with the latter option, because I was able to do training and stuff like that safely. And at this point, it's I like dead pause a lot of weight on my chest and push it right off. Like it's a lot safer than it was. And while it's not like fully back up to speed where we'd want it to be, like it's come such a tremendously long way from the start. And
Yeah.
very well next year I could still be in contention for some very big titles. So to me, adjusting, the psychological reaction to it all, not, overly panicking or catastrophizing, trying to make decisions with as much of a clear head as possible, consulting other people that could be even, objective, neutral sort of third parties, not just the coach. Just having conversations with other people and other lifters who have had similar injuries, being able to collect that information and that data, and then being able to make informed decisions based off of it, I think has paid off, tremendously. And even so, like if we get to a point in 3 or 4 months and we say, hey, like this has improved a lot, but this could get potentially a lot better with some medical intervention, then we'd still be open to considering it. I mean, whatever
Yeah.
at the end of the day gives me the best health and gives me the best chance to be the best that I can possibly be. That's kind of the way I see it. Even if it takes a little bit longer, I'm not too psychologically wrapped up in that anymore.
Yeah. Which lots of really good stuff to pull at there. One of the things, one of the ways that I like to frame this a lot for lifters that I work with is when we go into a training session, especially if we use RPE and we auto-regulate our training loads and training volumes and different things of that nature, everything's a series of choices. And if we're not feeling our best, if it's an off session, we need to let it be an off session. If we have this emotional reaction to an off session where then as a result of that emotional reaction, we deny the reality of the information that we have and want to push anyway because we're also now attached to hitting a certain load on that day.
Yeah.
And we ultimately hurt ourselves even more because at the end of the day, the thing that I like to point out is that there is no one singular session in your entire training career ever that will change the game so much that all of a sudden you go from a mid-tier lifter to the top tier. Like there is no one session that will make your career stand out. But there is that one session that could go the other direction.
Could take it all the way.
Yep. So we have to be able to make smart and grounded choices. And that's where taking care of your mind comes in and taking care of yourself so that you don't make those catastrophizing decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing I'd like to just quickly add to that point is, like when these bad sessions do happen, even when the injury happened, what I do is I actually, for like the rest of that day or for some of that day, as long as I need to, I actually allow myself to feel very upset about it. But I don't make a choice,
Oh, yeah.
decision. I don't, I don't pull the trigger on anything. I just kind of let, what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling about it just come out naturally, but I don't actually pull the trigger, make any sort of like just
Yeah.
irrational or rash decision. I let all that come out. It's I process it. I feel it, and then once that's done, then it's time to come together, gather information, data, make informed decisions with a clearer conscience and a clearer head.
Yeah.
You know, making rational training decisions doesn't mean that you don't feel anything or that you don't feel upset
Huge.
sometimes or frustrated. It
Yeah.
just means that you can process and feel those things and those emotions without making a rash decision. And then after you have processed those things, then making a decision when you are in a sort of clearer, more grounded state of mind.
Yeah. Absolutely. 100%. One of my favorite things from my journey as a father has been like what I've had to learn to be a better father. And one of them is dealing with the emotions of a child, because anybody that's a parent knows that the emotions of a child at any point in time can turn into a fucking tornado,
Yeah.
an absolute tornado. And one of the things that just a short little phrase that really helped me with that was, there's no bad or wrong emotion, but there are lots of wrong choices. There are lots of wrong behaviors, like how you act and how you respond to those emotions. So I think that applies here too. Like, you're right. We do need to feel those emotions. When they come up and they're like kind of ugly and dark, a lot of times we make poor choices because we deny ourselves the opportunity to feel those feelings that come up.
Exactly.
We want to push them away. We want to stuff them away. We want the session to be on track and normal. It's not. That's not the reality of the situation. So a big part of that, I really love to hear that you're talking about allowing ourselves to sit and feel whatever it is that's coming up, process it, integrate it, and then come back to the idea of, okay, now what do I do to make the choice to move forward? Like, what are my decisions that I need to make moving forward with the information I have now that I've had the opportunity to kind of work through the emotions, and I can make a more grounded, cognitive, intelligent choice and not just have this knee-jerk emotional reaction to it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I fully concur with all of what you just said. It's in a very easy, like 5 second way to illustrate this for people that might listen to this. I mean, it's kind of like if you try to if you try to avoid experiencing a lot of this stuff, like these emotions and things like that, and you just, it's going to rear its head back in a way that you might not like, right? So, I mean, just picture a beach ball, like you're at a pool. You are literally pushing on this thing, with all of your might, trying to keep it underwater. And it stays underwater, while you're actively pushing on it. But as soon as you get tired or fatigued, your grip starts to slip and it lets up, the ball just
Yep.
pops right back out in glorious fashion. And that's exactly what happens with a lot of these emotions, as well. And it can influence and directly influence your training. And like you said, while no single session ultimately elevates you from mid to top tier, a single session can end your career or take it away, or at
Yeah.
least kick you out of the game for quite a long time. So just kind of, I think tying those things together is super important in a lot of people's minds. And yes, kids, especially babies, don't regulate very well.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to you know teach them, help them along that path and teach them how to do that while also regulating our own emotions and our own, frustrations sometimes as well, without, making decisions that would, just rupture things.
Absolutely. That's definitely one of the things that I really like about like the psychology piece is, I think a lot of people in sport misinterpret it as just the visualization piece and all that stuff, but one of the biggest ones is the emotional regulation. We need to be able to regulate those emotions in a productive manner. I tend to think about it as that our inability to regulate those emotions is going to be the thing that leads us to making consistently poor choices.
Mm-hmm.
As a result, our training can't quite be as productive if we're consistently making poor choices, especially in an auto-regulated based system where we don't know what the loads are supposed to be today, we just know what our level of effort is, there's going to be a whole nother gambit of poor choices that come from poor emotional regulation. And at the end of the day, there's not a human on the planet that will not benefit from learning better emotional regulation skills.
Yeah.
We are emotional beings, and there is no getting away from them, and there is no stuffing them away. If you stuff them away, I love the beach ball under the water analogy. They will explode in some other way, shape, or form.
Yeah, absolutely. No matter how much you try to apply pressure and push down, and you eventually get tired, and eventually comes out. Comes out in a spectacular fashion sometimes.
Yeah.
It's huge, yeah. And I mean, it's really interesting, in auto-regulate, in like kind of auto-regulated, training strategies, it is chief. It is paramount to make, sound, reasonable decisions on a day-to-day basis. And, I think even for people who are, highly emotional lifters or who are newer lifters, that kind of even gets into like, training, methodology and stuff like that. And, how much should it be based off of regulation versus percent versus a mix. And I think all that gets really interesting too, actually. But, actually, I kind of want to add to that real quick. Something that I found that's been effective for me is actually having a very nice marriage of the two, mix of the two, right? I would say, maybe surprisingly to a lot of people, the majority of my training is actually percentage based. I still use RPE scales and I still use auto regulation, especially for certain sessions. But we have found that in the past, it's not just that it's led to like emotional decisions, but it's also more so the thing where, like, a true objective RPE 7 for me, even if I auto regulate on a day, is so objectively like high of a load sometimes that over time that can lead to a lot of erosion and stuff like that in my health and stuff too, and higher risk of injury. So using percentage has also kept me a lot safer, and the percentage strategy works so well for us because also we use a blend, but I'm just loosely saying percentage because even on the days where I come in and I don't feel great or when I do feel bad, usually what is like prescribed for that day, if I just if I tune stuff out, if I kind of take my time warming up, I lock it and I focus, like, more times than not, it actually goes okay. And sometimes I think that's another important psychological thing, having the discernment to know when to continue with a training session and intra, like in a day, versus when you maybe, pull back and kind of relax and just take it a little bit easier than you otherwise might. I think there's a time and place for both as well, and it can be a very tricky line to balance.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I think there's a lot of misperceptions of like reactive training systems programming being all high RPE, hard RPE work. And quite honestly, that's not the case. It's not the case in my training or a lot of the training that I write. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of percentage-based stuff to control the magnitude of that load and control a lot of the stress and stress index and things of that nature. So I definitely get, like, that's important to recognize where those tools are at. One of the big benefits that I've found in training on this psychological piece, with not just chasing after a load because of the RPE, but has also been along the lines of when I get to a certain point in a session, if I have more to do, I've actually found benefit in skipping it. Mm-hmm. And the emotional maturity has allowed me to not be rigidly disciplined in, like, there's a flexibility piece there that I have to bring into the fold. And some days that means, hey, you know what? I slept like crap last night, or maybe we were too active this weekend and we biked too far and too hard, and I need to not do as much work and let recovery take its place. And that's definitely the big psychological piece, is help me learn to be a little bit more flexible, disciplined with flexibility, and not rigidly disciplined.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I mean, with back downs, or with even certain, the number of back downs you may have, or certain accessories or things like that. Like, yeah, sometimes you may just need to call an audible. Sometimes you might just need to rest and heal. I mean, that's the name of we put a lot of strain and wear and tear on our bodies, and we do it in such a repetitive fashion, just over and over and over again and again, just incessantly placing stressors onto the body that the body has to adapt to. Sometimes the body gets tired. I don't know. The mind gets
Yeah,
tired,
it does.
and if the mind is tired and the body is tired, and we are just pushing just a little bit too hard again, like that's where you get into that line of of injury, of burn. I know some people don't like this word, of burnout, of just feeling exhausted or tired of competing, of training, and
Yeah.
again, those psychological effects can have such a profound influence on your training, and it can be a very slippery slope. And if you're tired on the day and you back off a little bit and you feel better the next day, that's a lot better than trying to force everything in every single time, every single day. And then after doing that so many times, you're so burnt out, you just stop doing it altogether. Or you
Yeah.
precipitously drop off in the amount of like work that you do because you're exhausted. So yeah, I think in the moment, intra adjustments and audible sometimes can be supremely beneficial.
What do you do, and or what have you learned in your pursuit of psychology and your doctorate that help guard you from that burnout?
Yeah, I think there's a good number of things. I think some of it is, I think we were just discussing, right? Just noticing, intra, like day to day, like when we're actually in the moment training, like, do I need to call an audible here? Do I maybe need to go 1 or 2 RP lower? Do I need to, back off a little bit? And it's not
Mm-hmm.
that I have to reach that decision point every single day, but once in a blue moon, like that day comes and I'm like, well, something's not feeling quite right, or I don't want to risk, like tearing or pulling or straining something, right?
Yeah.
And I've already kind of built into my psyche that everyone has those days, and I've normalized it for myself. So if it does come up and if it does happen, I don't get as upset about it as maybe I otherwise would if I hadn't have normalized it in my own
Yeah.
psyche. Some of the other things that kind of shield me from is also doing things that I enjoy outside of powerlifting, right? I think we all,
Yes, sir.
yeah, being a lot of,
Speaking my language there for sure.
yeah. I mean, a lot of powerlifting, again, it's you're doing three movements. Like the sport is 9 attempts, three movements. It is like all or nothing, and again, it's very very repetitive. I don't get bored powerlifting. I have fun, but I will say that
Same.
like I do, from time to time get tired of just okay, squat bench deadlift, squat bench deadlift. Like, no, so I do, and I even make my training a little more interesting, a little more fun. Like I put in certain accessories, I push certain things, I get gratification out of those things too, noticing the physical changes. Um, and then outside of just fitness and lifting all together, like what other things do you enjoy doing? Some people enjoy gaming, some people enjoy watching football, some people enjoy having a cigar with friends, time with family. I mean, all that to say, your life should be and needs to be more than just that sport that you are doing. You need to be
Yeah.
disciplined, you need to be regimented in your efforts, and you need to be consistent, but it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy life outside of it. And I would argue that enjoying life outside of it yields far, far more from burnout than not.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's definitely a big drum that I like to beat from an intentional training process, is that like your training ought to be adding value to your life, and your life ought to be adding value to your training, and there ought to be some kind of like mutual beneficial relationship between the two, and it not just be all or nothing. And I think that's one of the biggest ways a lot of people get burnt out is the
What
the
about that?
the oh, no worries, the value proposition, I guess, for lack of a better word, gets skewed, and it gets off, and it becomes unsustainable.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and again, like if you want sustainable training, if you want consistent, sustainable training that you can string together, I do think that shielding, against the psychological effects of things like burnout, of experiencing those, heightened emotions sometimes, having kind of emotion regulation strategies, or at the very least, just allowing yourself to experience the things without making rash decisions in the moment. I think all of these things, accumulate and ultimately lead to, you being the best powerlifter that you can possibly be. And again, like we said at the beginning of the conversation, I do think that the psychological aspect of this is, I don't want to say like it's extremely underlooked. I think people talk a lot more about it now than they used to, perhaps. But
Yeah.
I do think that it is supremely important, and we can't underestimate we can't underestimate its value to our training and how it can make our training so much better. I mean, there was a point in time though after the injury, especially for about 4 or 5 months, where most days I just dreaded going in to train, and I didn't enjoy it. And the reason why I kept going and doing it is because of consistency, because this is something I've done for so long and that I'm invested in, you know. But at the same point in time, it was just difficult to enjoy it. But as we kind of adjusted the training approach a bit, we made some tweaks. We focused on building momentum in the long term rather than repeatedly in the short term. Things started to pay off. We started to string together better sessions. I felt better and better about going into the gym. And, you know, my whole psyche just did kind of like a 180 flip, you know, just again, like changing the approach, but doing it from sort of a, you know, you know, cognitive sort of approach. All of that just to say, don't let not bad emotions, don't let, you know, strong emotions, don't let, you know, burnout, you know, influence your decisions, especially if there's something you can do about it. And with burnout, there usually is. It's just difficult to see in a moment because we feel so strongly about something. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I know I recall that we had hopped on a phone call when you were dealing with that injury, when I think it was fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
Like from a setting the stage for the question here, you had that tear in the middle of your prep for the Sheffield, which anybody that is up in the sport of powerlifting knows that that's one of the most prestigious meets of the entire year, and there's an opportunity to win quite a bit of money as well that comes along with it.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing, like, you have this fairly significant pec injury in the prep for this very significant meet. You're still pretty young. How old are you again? You're not even 30, if I recall correctly.
28, sir.
Yeah, 28. So, like, you got a lot of time. Father Time is not showing up yet for you. You got a ton ahead of you. So making poor choices now could eliminate that potential.
Right.
Right. But more significantly, when we jumped on our call, that I think was really important that you needed to talk through was, you got a kid on the way.
Mm-hmm.
What was going through your mind with that? Let's pull at that a little bit. You know, you got this injury, you have a big meet, but you got a big life thing coming along the way.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was a tumultuous period. There was a day or two I had to kind of feel things. I had to, one, decide if I was going to, you know, do Sheffield or not. And two, I had to, you know, make decisions that were, you know, best for I had to balance making decisions that were best for my health because I have a son coming in. If I permanently, you know, or significantly injured or hurt myself, and, you know, I robbed, you know, myself and my son of things that we could do together as I get older, for the sake of, you know, just one competition. I mean, I understand it's a big competition, but for the sake of one competition or thing, you know, that would have been very difficult to contend with. And at the end of the day, I asked myself if that one was worth it, you know, one competition being worth it over a lifetime of being able to functionally move around and do things like, you know, with, you know, my son and potentially other kids down the line. Like, one competition is just not worth that much to me. It's worth a lot to me in the sense that, you know, I committed to it. I wanted to go do it even if I knew I couldn't be at my best, you know. So I ultimately did it. I didn't do anything that positioned myself or put myself into a position where I knew I was going to make what had already happened a lot worse, right? Yeah. I just performed and competed within the confines of what I knew I was capable, and that was that. But being present and being physically capable, you know, for, you know, my son, my wife, and my career, you know, like a lot of other things too, is more important, you know, at the end of the day. You know, are you going to choose glory? Are you going to chase glory in a competition over, you know, your own flesh and blood, your son, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe some can, but I can't do it. I can't do that.
Yeah, man. Things that come up for me with talking through stuff like this, I remember many years ago when my niece was born. Mm-hmm. My dad was a firefighter, And right around the same time my niece was born, he was on a call and he tripped on a hose and fell backwards and put his hand down to catch himself and dislocated his elbow. Ooh. And had a really hard time with rehab, and it took far longer to recover from that than most people would have liked. But it also, his granddaughter was just born. Like, he was seeing how frustrated my dad was at not being able to function and pick up his granddaughter, like, made a big impression on me at that time. And I remember a couple of years ago when I was dealing with my chronic hip thing that was nagging at me, and I was getting ready for a meet, and I didn't want to not train hard because I'm getting ready for this meet, and this is a cool meet, and I really want to do this meet, but my hip's bothering me. And I made the comment to Vanessa one day, I'm like, I'm worried that if, like, I hurt my hip, like, I wouldn't be able to run to save Rosalie from danger. And the second those words came out of my mouth out loud, everything got really fucking real. I'm like, whoa, I can't make this one meet that important that I can't function in life.
Yeah.
Because, look, at the end of the day, we're in a hobbyist sport of powerlifting. What's the purse of the Sheffield for first place? I can't remember off the top of my head. It's what, $50,000?
Yeah, it's a significant amount of money. Yeah, it's a lot.
Right, but $50,000. That's, that's a nice purse, but that's not life changing. Like, if you are really smart with $50,000, sure, you can definitely start to change the trajectory of your life, but it's not the NFL where it's a multi-million-dollar contract.
Right. Very different.
So,
yeah,
very different. We have a responsibility to ourselves and our well-being to not chase little things like that, right?
Right.
And I think that's a balance in training, to not chase 2.5 kilos for something that's outside of where your ability is. So, like, you psychologically lifting within your ability, even though that meant significantly underperforming on bench press and total, and specifically in a meet like that, was really important for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I knew that I would only be able to do so much. I mean, even squatting, getting in a position like with the pec thing, and then even deadlifting, it created a slight evenness, like when I'm pulling, because one side is not all where it should be, right? And I understood, like, I was severely handicapped going into it. And I knew that I wouldn't be able to do what I wanted to do. And honestly, before the injury, and this isn't pride or arrogance speaking, but I was in a very good position to potentially win it. The training was trending towards that, but things happen, life happens. But I will say, on the other side of all of this, I'm really glad that I still went and competed and did it, because at the end of the day, I think I'm going to tie it all back together. When we talked in the very beginning about how a lot of the sport, a lot of me competing, it hasn't just been for myself, right? It's, I think, been to hopefully, like, the benefit of other people, and, has positively influenced others' lives. And I know that when I went out to compete, despite all of what was going on with that, with, a newborn son on the way, with, studying for my licensure exam, completing my internship year, getting my doctorate, finishing my dissertation. I had went through a lot in that prep. I really did. But being able to still go out, to still do something, memorable, put up like a world record squat or whatever, to show a little bit of, a little bit of grit, a little bit of, character, also some grace too, knowing that I wouldn't be the best that I could be. I think it did I think that on its own also had a profoundly positive impact on a lot of people. And I got those messages from people, and, that it meant a lot to me, knowing that me going out and competing and doing something didn't seem like a waste. It was good.
Yeah, absolutely. What were some of the, I guess, action items that you did along the way to manage and navigate that situation that people listening might be able to apply if they find themselves in a similar situation, or just find themselves dealing with some hardship in their training? Yeah,
I mean, first things first, I think having a coach is supremely helpful. Having, or at least, sounding board of trusted, of trusted individuals that can be relatively objective with your training, but also know you well. I think that was supremely helpful during that period. Marcellus really was helpful in helping me navigate some of those very rough waters.
Yeah.
And we were able to adjust as much as necessary, as much as needed to get us, to that platform.
Yeah.
And without him, it may not have happened. It may not have happened, or it may have happened
Yeah.
a lot differently in a way that I wouldn't have liked, um, a way that I wouldn't have felt proud of. I think that's number one. Having a coach, or some trusted individuals that know you well, that can help you navigate some of those rough waters in your training. Secondarily, I think, again, like having something fun that you can do outside of powerlifting, or at least a big part of that is the social piece, right? So, social support. I think having, good friends. I think having, good intact relationships with people, um, hanging out with them, talking with them, and maybe even, telling them a little bit about how you're feeling and what's going on with all that stuff, is also, I think very, very helpful in that kind of situation. And lastly, I would just say and offer that I don't know if people are, spiritual or religious or whatever. For me, prayer was very helpful. That's just something that was helpful
Yeah.
for me personally. So do with that information what you will.
Yeah, definitely. One other layer to this question I want to add in there, because I think one of the things that I tend to observe in society is when a circumstance like this comes up, it's very common to see people get attached to the circumstance and allow that circumstance to bleed into a victimhood mentality, and like, oh no, this is happening to me, instead of it realizing that it's happening for you. And while it may not be the situation you wanted, it's the situation that's the reality, and there's gifts there for you to learn when you choose to accept the reality of the situation and allow yourself to learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
From like psychology and all that education, what have you learned that can allow and allow somebody to detach from the circumstance and see the gift and see the vision to up level and go past that?
Yeah, there's something that I like to call a healthy psychological gap or healthy psychological distance.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this isn't pushing away, emotions or thoughts. This isn't even trying to change them, but this is just creating a healthy psychological distance from them. You know, telling yourself, instead of, I am anxious, or I am depressed, the distance kind of looks like, I notice that I am, having these thoughts, or I notice that I am experiencing these feelings, not, just so strongly identifying what some of these thoughts and these emotions. I think is very, very helpful. If you've routinely practiced that truly in your day to day, I think you'll be able to make more decisions effectively with a little bit more of an even keel. Secondarily, I would say try to focus on just each individual day in each individual session, right? Try to be as present and as focused on that individual day and individual session as you possibly can be. There's a saying, it's a little crude, if you have one foot in the past and one foot in the present, then you're pissing on today, right? So
Yeah,
with that,
I like that. Yeah.
so with that, the reason why I say that is because a lot of the times when we are feeling very upset about training, or some people, if they are feeling anxious, or if they notice they're having these, feelings of like, depression, like, or feeling sad or frustrated, you just have to remember that, if there is such a preoccupation with what happened in the past with an injury, or what might happen in the future, since I got injured, I don't know how this meet will go, then it's very difficult to show up day to day and just be fully immersed and focused in each session. And your training suffers as a result of it. So you have to have this ability to create a healthy psychological gap and distance, right? Not to push away, not even always to change. You still can experience things, but a healthy psychological gap and distance with a sort of particular focus and engagement with present moment, with what's going on right now in the session. What is my goal for today? And if I accomplish what I set out to do today, then in the long run, I'm a step closer to where I want to be in the future regardless, right? And letting smaller wins and victories accumulate rather than just trying to force a big one to happen each day. That's another thing I would say. I have become, okay with collecting small wins along the way. If I squat 600 pounds, for example, relative to my max, it's not like a huge percentage, but I do 600 and it moves very, very well. I'm going to feel really good about it. I know it's only 600 compared to the max, but I'm also like, well, this felt really, really good. This is a really good indication. I am a step closer to where I want to be. This day went well. Firstly, like if I do 600 and it doesn't feel great, but it still moves okay, I'm like, well, today didn't feel great. There's probably reasons for that, but that's okay. I got the work done. I'm still a step closer to where I want to be. So I'm just engaged with the present moment as much as possible, and session to session as much as possible, and stringing together the victories. And stringing together all those victories eventually normally leads to a larger victory at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
The last thing I just want to say is consistent effort, consistent focus in the present moment over time, stringing together small victories, more times than not, eventually gets rewarded.
Absolutely. I love that that's where you went with that, because in a lot of the stuff promoting like this intentional training process, one of the things that I do with that is I journal in my while I train. I journal and just have different affirmations and statements and like all kinds of different stuff. But the first sentence that I write in my journal every day when I go out to train is, I am present with my training. Like right now is right now. And when I'm really locked in and I'm really present with my training, that very first warm-up at 70 kilos, I can usually tell. I've gotten to the point where I can gauge where the session might go based on how connected to 70 kilos I am.
Yeah.
And it's really neat to think about it from that lens, because relative to my max, 70 kilos is, sub 30%. So to be able to be that low in magnitude and be able to have a pulse and a read, cool. Now I really am present. I'm focused on what I'm doing. I'm not worried about the future, and I'm not judging the past.
Right.
I'm right here, right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great strategy, honestly. I think, if you are a lifter and whether or not like the psychological aspect is something you struggle with or don't struggle with, I do think that, journaling can definitely be helpful. I do think that also just ultimately being in the present moment and just being keenly focused on and aware of your body, of how it's feeling, of how it's moving, right? Even with those lighter loads and those lighter weights. And as you go up, just sort of intentionally focusing, on what you're doing. I think it goes such a long way. And I try to do that in my session. I try to get as absolutely just laser focused in on what I'm doing as possible. And I try to shut out all the other noise, because I notice that when I don't, things start to go sideways in training sometimes, or things won't move as well as I, like or want, or like these things will happen, right? But it won't even be because of like not feeling good that day. It will be because I just wasn't focused. I wasn't engaged with that present moment. So I think when it comes to intra-session and stringing together smaller victories, if the listeners, if you don't take anything else away from this part of the conversation, I would say as much as you possibly can, be in contact, be thoroughly engaged with the present moment, and try to get in tune with your body as much as possible while you're training.
Yeah, man. That's huge for sure. I love that. One last question before, as we wrap things up here. We've been chatting for a minute, but I have one more question for you.
Sure.
How has this training process, this training journey, particularly the hardship around navigating the pec injury, in your short time so far as being a father, how has all this training and this hardship helped you show up and be a better father at the start of this journey of fatherhood?
No, it's a great question, and it's not one I get asked often, so it causes me to reflect. But the first thing that immediately comes to mind, a word that I like is patience, right? Patience and grace. I think over time, over the years, like as things have gone my way or have not gone my way, I've had to deal with very, very difficult or very tall obstacles. I've had to regulate. I've had to negotiate. I've had to I've had to, more than anything else, develop, patience and grace, grace for myself, grace for others, patience with myself, patience with others in all my experiences. And that has, with a baby who doesn't have patience and doesn't have the ability to regulate,
Right.
has helped me as much as I can, to be a reasonable sort of calm in that storm, right? And I think that that has been, huge because over time, this behavior is going to be modeled to him. And he's going to be seeing this. And more times than not, kids a lot more will do what they see rather than what they hear, right?
Yeah.
And for me,
100%.
being a strong role model and role modeling, I mean, yes, of course, you need to speak to your kids, obviously, but through action, right? Through action, through being present in moments, through being available, I want to model all of these things to him as he gets older. All of these things that I've learned throughout the years through my education, through powerlifting, through mentors, like I want to be aware in a present moment. I want to be engaged. I want to show him what patience looks like. I want to show him what grace looks like. And then beyond that, I want to show him what consistent effort looks like and how it can be rewarded. I want to show him that fitness, can be a part of your routine. I want to show him that, whether he chooses to be, in strength sport or not, whatever he wants to do with his life, right? I don't expect him to, you know, be who I am. I want him to be who he is.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like a side, all that to say, consistency, discipline, effort, being present, being available, being in the moment, um, you know, um, regulating and managing, emotions, showing him that it's okay to experience emotions and not trying to just completely, blunt or shove them down or pretend they don't exist, but to, express in a healthy way, in a way that doesn't lead to, some of the things that we see when a lot of, people as they get older don't have good emotion regulation. I mean, there's some strong consequences for that, right? I mean, if you just look out in the world in society, um, you know, um, um, prisons, places like that are full of people that haven't been able to, express emotions in a healthy manner, and for one reason or another, have somehow, lashed out against a world or a system that it thinks, that they think have injustice, them. And I know it's a
Yeah.
lot more complex than that, but the point is, I want him to be able to healthily experience emotions, including intense emotions, and to be
Yeah.
able to regulate, to control, or rather than control, inhibit as necessary, and to be disciplined and to show consistent, effort and all of the things. I'm, talking in a circle now, but these are all
Yeah.
just things that matter, I think, that can make your life a lot better, that can help you be a lot more present minded, that can help you be a lot more focused, and that can just help make you be, you know, more successful in any venture or endeavor that you want to engage in. All of these things, I think, really matter. And it's hard to put it all into words, at least at this moment, but um, what I what I'm not as good at, in putting into words, hopefully I can put into action and show him.
Yeah.
It's older.
For sure. For sure. I like all that. I think that's fantastic stuff. Even thinking back to your beach ball analogy and, I suppose a violent action, a display of a violent action from somebody, that's the beach ball.
Yep. Exactly. That is exactly
Yep.
what that is. Yep.
And that's that person not having a healthy expression, a healthy release. Stuff it down, stuff it down, stuff it down. Something happens, boom, they blow up, throw a fist, throw a knife, whatever it is, some kind of violent outburst reaction. That is the beach ball jumping up out of the pool.
This is exactly what it is. And that's what I was saying earlier. Sometimes it comes out in a spectacular fashion. And I'm not using that word with a positive connotation either, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I get it for sure. For sure. Awesome, Ashton. Awesome stuff, Ashton. I appreciate your time and all that you shared with us. How can people find you if they want to reach out to you and if they have any questions, if you're willing to engage in that?
I'd be more than happy to. The best way to reach me is just through Instagram. That's the main thing that I use. That's what I, normally on. I check it regularly. I don't have too many other forms of social media. Instagram is the best. by
Gotcha.
lot. So it's like at
Yeah.
and then Ash ASHHH and then like underscore 117, and the 117 is a Halo reference video game.
Gotcha. Cool, man. Well, I appreciate you. You have a great day.
Yes, you too. Thank you, brother. Good to be on here.